Welcome to Folktales. In the throbbing heart of Lagos, a city that breathes ambition and exhales dust and dreams, there are stories etched into every bustling street corner, every gleaming high-rise, and every makeshift shack. But some stories are not just told, they are felt. They cling to your spirit like the humid air, leaving a scent of fate and the bitter taste of what could have been. This is one such tale. A labyrinth woven with threads of betrayal, desperation, and the silent scream of unhealed wounds. It begins in the gilded cage of untold wealth and ends, perhaps, in the quiet dignity of a life reborn, tracing the unpredictable journey of a fortune that chose its own path, guided by the unseen hands of destiny and the watchful eyes of ancestors. Brace yourself, for the market cries and the distant hum of generators are but a backdrop to a drama far more profound, where the weight of a single mattress could upturn worlds. Richard Okoro, a name whispered with a mix of awe and resentment, in the corridors of power, moved through his opulent Ikoyi mansion with the predatory grace of a leopard in its prime. His tailored suits, crisp as a freshly ironed Nara note, could not conceal the restless ambition that gnawed at his soul. He was a man who had mastered the art of acquisition, his political career a meticulously crafted edifice built not on public service, but on a foundation of shady deals, whispered bribes, and the calculated betrayal of allies. Around him, the mansion gleamed, a testament to his success. Imported marble floors, gold-leafed ceilings, art pieces that cost more than entire villages. Yet, within its gilded walls, a silent rot had begun to spread, poisoning the very air. He breathed. His smile, though quick and charming for the cameras, rarely reached his eyes, which held the cold, calculating glint of a taxidermist focused on his next prize. His wife, Vanessa, a woman of quiet strength and traditional beauty, moved through the same space like a ghost, her devotion a stark contrast to Richard's emotional bankruptcy. She managed their elaborate household, oversaw the cooks preparing sumptuous meals of jollof rice and pounded yam, and entertained dignitaries with grace that belied the growing chasm in her heart. For years, she had wrapped herself in the illusion of a perfect life, enduring Richard's increasing distance, his late nights, and the chilling silence that had replaced their once vibrant conversations. She had once loved him fiercely, had seen the raw potential beneath his youthful ambition, dreaming of a future built on shared values and family. But the Lagos political machine had devoured that man, spitting out a hardened, cynical version, obsessed only with more, always more. A river without banks floods the village, her grandmother used to say, a proverb that now echoed ominously in Vanessa's mind, a subtle warning of unchecked greed. Richard's boundless ambition had indeed overflowed, submerging their marriage in a torrent of materialism and deceit. He saw her not as a partner, but as an elegant accessory, a necessary fixture in the tableau of his power. Richard's most intimate secrets weren't kept in safes or encrypted files, but in the most unassuming places within their fortress-like home, hidden beneath loose floorboards, tucked behind false panels, and in the hollowed-out spine of ancient academic texts, hundreds of thousands of dollars in illicit cash lay dormant, a testament to his paranoia and meticulousness. He trusted no bank, no digital ledger, only the cold, tangible feel of paper money. His largest, most carefully planned stash, however, was concealed within an old, unassuming mattress in their guest bedroom, a mattress that had seen better days, deemed too old to be scrutinized, too ordinary to arouse suspicion. It was a perfect hiding spot, a bulky, innocuous item that no one, not even Vanessa, would ever think to examine. The thought of it, a physical manifestation of his power, brought him a perverse satisfaction. He often pictured the stacks of crisp bills, dreaming of the day they would be put to use for his ultimate power play, a day when he would finally be untouchable, beyond the reach of any law, any consequence. The air in the Okoro mansion, despite the humming air conditioners, felt heavy, suffocating Vanessa with its unspoken truths. She had always been perceptive, her intuition a finely tuned instrument inherited from generations of wise women who read signs in the flight of birds and the rustle of leaves. Lately, her instrument hummed with discord. It wasn't just the late nights or the increasingly flimsy excuses Richard offered. It was the subtle shift in his gaze, the way he would suddenly check his phone, a guardedness that had replaced the open trust once shared between them. A woman knows her husband, even when he tries to obscure himself behind a wall of pretense, like trying to hide the sun with a sieve. She had seen the way his new secretary, a stunning young woman named Ngozi, carried herself around him, a little too confidently, a little too familiar. Ngozi, with her intricately braided hair and fashionably tailored Ankara outfits, was a constant, unsettling presence in their lives. She was always there, at official events, fetching Richard's coffee, her laughter a little too bright when he complimented her. Vanessa observed from the periphery, her heart a heavy stone in her chest. She remembered her mother's advice, given on her wedding day. A wife's strength is in her discerning eye, but her wisdom is in knowing when to act and when to pray. Vanessa had prayed for strength, for clarity, for the return of the man. She married, but the signs grew more blatant, like a storm gathering on the horizon, too large to ignore. The faint scent of a different perfume on Richard's clothes, a lingering trace of vanilla and jasmine that was decidedly not hers, became a torment. Each breath was a struggle against the growing suspicion, an invisible weight pressing down on her. One evening, Richard, unusually flustered, had left his phone unattended on the sitting room table as he rushed to answer a sudden call from his political strategists. Vanessa, passing by, caught a fleeting glimpse of an incoming message on the screen before it locked. "Can't wait for tonight, my love. N." Her heart seized, a cold dread washing over her. It was Ngozi. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The gilded walls of her prison suddenly felt colder, harder. The hum of the air conditioning sounded like a mocking whisper, echoing the chilling reality of her husband's betrayal. The pain was sharp, a dagger twisting in an old wound, for this wasn't just about infidelity. It was about the desecration of everything she believed their marriage stood for, everything she had sacrificed. The ancestral spirits, she imagined, must be weeping, lamenting the loss of integrity in their son. A sense of profound injustice settled upon her, heavier than any sorrow. Far from the polished opulence of Ikoyi, in a labyrinthine network of unpaved roads and corrugated iron roofs in Ajagunle, David and Grace lived a life stripped bare by poverty. Their home, a single room shared with the ghosts of their past, offered little solace from the harsh realities of Lagos. The incessant drone of generators, the distant strains of Fuji music, and the mingled aromas of street food and open drains were their daily symphony. Life had been a relentless uphill battle, each step burdened by the weight of unfulfilled dreams and the agonizing memory of a loss that had shattered their world years ago. They were not homeless in the literal sense of sleeping on the streets, but the term home felt like a cruel irony, a place marked by absence rather than warmth. Their greatest joy, their only child, a bright-eyed boy named Emeka, had been taken from them by a swift, merciless fever. It had been a blur of desperation, of rushing him through the choked traffic to a clinic that demanded payment they simply didn't have. No cash, no treatment, the nurse had said, her voice devoid of compassion, a cold echo that still haunted their waking hours and invaded their deepest slumbers. Emeka's small body, racked with pain, had succumbed before they could scrape together enough money, before David could sell enough of his meager wares at the market, before Grace could beg enough from indifferent relatives. The memory was a festering wound that refused to heal, a constant reminder of their powerlessness, of the brutal truth that in this city, life often came with a price tag they couldn't afford. They lived with the lingering what-ifs, the heavy, burden of knowing that a few thousand naira could have saved their son. The rich kill with their greed, the poor with their poverty, Grace often murmured, staring into the flickering candlelight. Since Amika's death, a shroud of hopelessness had descended upon them, thick and suffocating. David, once a man of vibrant energy, now moved with a perpetual slump, his shoulders bearing the invisible weight of grief. He scavenged for odd jobs, repaired broken electronics, and sometimes, out of sheer desperation, pushed a wheelbarrow through the markets, but the earnings were never enough. Grace, whose laughter once filled their small home, now only offered terse answers, her eyes hollow, reflecting a pain too deep for tears. They existed rather than lived, their days a monotonous cycle of hunger, toil, and the quiet despair that clung to them like the dust of the city. Their dreams had withered, replaced by the grim determination to simply survive another day. The absence of a child, the weight of a barren household, felt like a judgment in a society where children are considered the ultimate blessing, a vital link to the ancestors, a promise of continuity. Their future felt as bleak and empty as their pockets, their spirits crushed beneath the relentless march of time that brought no healing, only more sorrow. The text message, a cruel whisper in the dark, had shattered Vanessa's carefully constructed world. The veneer of devotion, the years of silent sacrifice, crumbled in an instant. Her carefully cultivated composure dissolved into a tempest of raw emotion. It wasn't just anger. It was a humiliation so profound it seared her soul. A betrayal that felt like a physical blow. Richard, her husband, the man she had given her youth, her loyalty, her very identity, had mocked their sacred vows. In a society where a woman's worth was often intertwined with her husband's status and the sanctity of her marriage, this betrayal was public, even if only she knew it yet. When a woman is wronged, her fury can turn the calmest river into a raging flood, her grandmother's voice echoed, a prophecy that now found its vivid manifestation in Vanessa's heart. The following morning, Richard, oblivious to the storm brewing within his wife, left for work with his usual hurried kiss and a preoccupied air. The moment the mansion gates clanged shut behind his luxury car, Vanessa's fury erupted. It began, subtly, with a cold, precise anger that manifested in tidying, an almost obsessive need to erase any trace of him from her immediate surroundings. She started with his clothes, meticulously sorting, then discarding those she deemed old or unnecessary, though many were perfectly fine, even expensive. Each item tossed into the discard pile was a small act of defiance, a silent scream against his infidelity. The house staff, sensing the unusual tension, moved like shadows, exchanging nervous glances but daring not to question, "Madam." They knew that when a woman of her stature, a first lady in all but official title, moved with such a focused intensity, it was best to simply stay out of her way. Her rampage soon escalated. She moved through the mansion like a whirlwind, her movements sharp and decisive. Every item that reminded her of Richard's self-indulgence, his materialistic obsession, became a target. Expensive designer shoes were thrown into charity bags, watches tossed into a box for donation. Her eyes, usually soft, now burned with a cold fire, reflecting the devastation within. She ripped through his study, his walk-in closet, purging, cleansing, trying to erase his presence from her life, piece by painful piece. Then, a peculiar glint in her eyes, she entered the guest bedroom. There, amidst other forgotten items, stood an old, bulky mattress. It was a relic, one Richard had inexplicably insisted on keeping, even after updating all the others. To Vanessa, it represented his stubbornness, his arbitrary preferences, and his disdain for her suggestions. "This old thing is worthless," she muttered, her voice edged with contempt as she imagined him perhaps even having used this very bed to entertain his paramours. She saw it as a symbol of his past, a discarded, stained object, much like her emotional state. Without a second thought, driven by a raw, unthinking need for vengeance, she ordered the bewildered staff to remove it from the house, along with a heap of other unwanted items, instructing them to take everything to the local charity donation point, or wherever it would be accepted. The old mattress, heavy with untold secrets, was unceremoniously hauled out of the opulent mansion, beginning its unwitting journey into an entirely different world. The old mattress, saggy and worn, was hoisted onto the back of a rickety three-wheeler delivery truck, destined for the crowded donation center in Oshodi. It lay amongst a motley collection of discarded treasures: chipped ceramic plates, a faded armchair with a broken leg, children's clothes too small for their original owners, and a stack of yellowed magazines. Its journey through the city was a microcosm of Lagos itself, a chaotic ballet of motion and sound. The truck rumbled and coughed through streets choked with gridlock, past hawkers expertly balancing their wares on their heads, past sleek SUVs vying for space with rusty minibuses, and past towering billboards advertising dreams unattainable to most. The mattress, oblivious to the millions tucked within its frayed seams, bounced and swayed, shedding a fine dust of forgotten stories with every bump in the road. The donation center, a bustling hub of charity and necessity, was a place where discarded possessions found new purpose, where one person's trash truly became another's treasure. The staff, overworked and underpaid, quickly unloaded the truck, sorting items with practiced efficiency. The mattress, too bulky and stained to be easily resold, was initially relegated to a corner, marked for eventual disposal or repurposing. It waited there for hours, absorbing the cacophony of the market outside, the bargaining voices, the distant calls to prayer, the smell of roasted plantain and diesel fumes. It was a witness to the endless cycle of giving and receiving, of the fragile interplay between abundance and scarcity that defined life in this sprawling metropolis. Its silence was profound, holding its secret tighter than a clam's shell, while the world bustled around it, unaware of the fortune slumbering within its depths. What seems insignificant can hold the greatest weight. As evening approached, painting the Lagos sky in hues of fiery orange and dusty purple, David, with his wife Grace, arrived at the center. They weren't there to donate, but to scavenge, hoping to find any useful item to furnish their sparse room, perhaps even a piece of scrap metal David could repurpose. His eyes, accustomed to seeking value in the discarded, fell upon the old mattress. It was dirty, yes, and clearly used, but it was intact, offering far more comfort than the woven mats they currently slept on. Its sheer size was a challenge, but the thought of a proper bed, a respite from the hard floor, ignited a flicker of hope in Grace's tired eyes. It was a silent plea, a yearning for simple comfort in a life devoid of luxury. It might be old, but it still has life in it, David reasoned, a faint smile touching his lips. He negotiated with the center's weary attendant, offering a small sum he could barely afford for its transport, a price barely enough to cover the labor of 2 young men who helped him hoist it onto a borrowed handcart. The mattress began its final leg of the journey, pushed slowly through the darkening streets, its new owners full of a cautious optimism they hadn't felt in years, unaware that they were rolling a king's ransom into their humble abode. The urban landscape, a tapestry of contrasts, had orchestrated a meeting of fates. The journey home with the mattress was arduous, a testament to David and Grace's desperation and their enduring strength. Pushing the cumbersome handcart through the narrow, crowded lanes of Ajagunle, past children playing street football and women haggling over vegetables, they drew curious stares. The mattress, an anomaly in their economically depressed neighborhood, seemed to announce their meager acquisition with a quiet pride. Sweat beaded on David's brow, his muscles aching, but the thought of Grace's comfort, of a proper place to rest their bone-weary bodies, spurred him on. Grace, walking beside him, periodically helping to steady the load, offered soft words of encouragement, her hope a fragile, precious thing she guarded fiercely. "Small mercies," she whispered, "are still mercies." Finally, they reached their single shared room, a sanctuary from the bustling chaos outside. It was small, sparsely furnished, with faded walls and a single window overlooking a communal tap. But it was theirs, a refuge where they could retreat from the harsh gaze of the world. With much effort and a shared grunt of exertion, they maneuvered the mattress through the doorway, its bulk filling a significant portion of their living space. It was a tight fit, but seeing it finally settled, transforming the room, brought a profound sense of accomplishment. It was more than just a piece of furniture. It was a symbol of their resilience, a small victory in a life defined by struggle. The lingering smell of old fabric and dust filled the air, replacing the usual aromas of cooking and dampness. As David straightened his aching back, Grace ran her hand over the mattress's surface, a faint smile gracing her lips. "This will be good, David," she said, her voice soft with a tenderness he hadn't heard in years. They envisioned comfortable nights, a deeper rest than they had known since Amika's death. The mattress, heavy with its secret, offered a silent promise of comfort, an illusion of security. They carefully spread their cleanest, though threadbare bedspread over it, smoothing out the wrinkles. It looked imposing, a giant in their modest dwelling, yet it also brought a strange sense of grounding. For a moment, the crushing grief for Emeka lessened, replaced by the simple human desire for warmth and repose. They sat on its edge, side by side, feeling the soft give of the springs, a luxurious sensation they hadn't experienced in years. The day's exhaustion, the relentless weight of their poverty, seemed to momentarily lift, replaced by a quiet contentment. They knew nothing of the world from which it came, nothing of the secrets it held, only that it represented a small, unexpected blessing in their otherwise desolate lives. The mattress was a bridge between two worlds, its untold story waiting to unfold in the most unexpected of hands. The first few nights on the new mattress were a revelation. David and Grace slept more soundly than they had in years, the soft cushioning a balm to their weary bodies. The hard ground and thin mats had always left them with aching backs and restless spirits. But now, a deeper, more peaceful sleep embraced them. It was a small luxury, almost unbelievable, a comfort they had long ago forgotten. Yet, despite the newfound solace, there was an unfamiliar firmness in one particular section of the mattress, a subtle lump that resisted their weight, a slight unevenness that Grace noticed while changing the bedspread. It was not uncomfortable, merely peculiar, like an old scar. "Perhaps the springs are damaged," David mused, though he paid it little mind, grateful for any improvement to their sleeping arrangement. One sweltering afternoon, the heat in their small room became unbearable, turning the air thick and stifling. Grace, ever resourceful, decided to air out the mattress, hoping to dissipate some of the accumulated warmth and a lingering musty odor. With David's help, they carefully carried it outside, leaning it against the wall of their compound, allowing the harsh African sun and the dry breeze to work their magic. As Grace beat the mattress with a stick, a common practice to remove dust and refresh bedding, a small tear in the fabric, barely noticeable before, began to widen. A corner of something stiff, green, and unfamiliar poked out. Her curiosity piqued. She tentatively reached in. Her fingers brushed against a thick wad of paper, surprisingly heavy. With a gasp, Grace pulled out not just one wad, but several, tightly bound with rubber bands. Her eyes, wide with disbelief, stared at the crisp. Green banknotes, a stack of US dollars. She fumbled with shaking hands, unraveling one of the bundles. Tens, 50s, hundreds. It was real. "David! David, come quickly!" Her voice, a choked whisper, brought him running from where he was chatting with a neighbor. He saw the money, a small mountain of greenbacks accumulating on the sun-baked earth, and his own eyes widened, mirroring hers. They knelt beside the mattress, their hearts thumping like talking drums. More money, bundled tightly, was still hidden deep within the foam and coiled springs. It wasn't just a few notes, it was stacks upon stacks, a fortune beyond their wildest dreams. Millions. The sheer amount was staggering, defying comprehension. It was enough to stop the aching grief, enough to perhaps even revisit the pain of Amika's untreated illness, to ensure no other child faced such a fate. The sun beat down, but they felt a sudden chill, a profound sense of awe mixed with a disorienting fear. "What is this, Grace?" David finally managed, his voice raspy, barely audible amidst the sudden roar of his thoughts. "Is this a blessing or a curse?" The question hung in the air, a heavy, unanswered chord, as the magnitude of their discovery began to sink in, threatening to drown them in its impossible reality. The money, once a symbol of Richard's hidden power, now lay exposed, a dangerous beacon in the harsh light of Ajagunle. Richard Okoro returned to his mansion that evening, his mind buzzing with the latest political maneuverings, his ego inflated by another successful day of veiled threats and strategic compromises. He expected the usual calm, the familiar routine. Instead, he walked into a house that felt different. Not messy, but strangely sparse. The air, usually thick with the scent of expensive polish and gourmet cooking, seemed thinner, carrying a faint, unsettling echo of absence. He noticed small things first. His favorite, albeit worn, leather armchair was gone from his study. A particular ceramic vase he secretly admired, a gift from a foreign dignitary, was missing from the hallway. A cold knot began to tighten in his stomach. He called for Vanessa, his voice sharper than usual. She emerged, her face a mask of cool indifference. But her eyes held a spark, a subtle triumph he couldn't quite decipher. "Where are my things, Vanessa?" he demanded, the tremor in his voice betraying his rising irritation. She calmly explained, her voice devoid of emotion, how she had cleared out old unwanted items and sent them for donation. "It was time for a purge, Richard, to make space, to refresh our lives," she stated, her gaze unwavering, a silent challenge in her eyes. The mention of refreshing their lives struck him with an unexpected chill, but his mind was already racing, cataloging what was missing. He paced through the house, his anxiety mounting with each absent item. His custom-made shoes, his collection of vintage wristwatches. Indeed, even some of his less-used suits were gone. Then, he went to the guest bedroom, a room rarely used, a room he had chosen for its utter obscurity. He flung open the door, his heart already pounding a frantic rhythm. His eyes scanned the room, landing on the empty space where the old, bulky mattress had always resided. Panic, cold, and visceral seized him. The mattress, the one, his breath hitched in his throat. Millions. Stacks of crisp, untraceable currency. His lifeline, his ultimate safeguard against any future political fallout, were inside that mattress. He spun around, his face white, his carefully constructed mask of power crumbling, revealing the raw fear beneath. "The mattress! Where is the mattress, Vanessa?" he bellowed, his voice no longer controlled, but a desperate croak. "The old one in the guest room." Vanessa, still simmering with the righteous anger of a betrayed wife, watched his terror with a grim satisfaction. This was the revenge she craved, seeing him stripped of his composure, his arrogance. But then, as he began to frantically describe the mattress, her own stomach lurched. His words echoed in her mind. Millions. Untraceable. Lifeline. The magnitude of what she had unknowingly done, what she had carelessly tossed away in a fit of rage, suddenly slammed into her. Her vindictive triumph evaporated, replaced by a cold wave of shock and a growing sense of dread. The air thickened again, but this time with a different kind of tension, a shared, unspoken horror. The ghost of her vengeance now wore a face of potential ruin, and she found herself caught in a trap of her own making. David and Grace sat on the floor, the vast sum of money spread out between them like an impossible dream. The initial shock had given way to a profound, unsettling silence. The crisp bills, illuminated by the single, flickering bulb, seemed to glow with an otherworldly light, a dangerous allure. For two people who had known nothing but scarcity, the sheer volume of cash was overwhelming, almost terrifying. Grace, typically the more pragmatic, felt a tremor run through her. "This money, David, it does not belong to us," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's like finding a lion in a goat pen. It brings trouble." Her Yoruba heritage, steeped in the wisdom of communal harmony and the watchful eyes of ancestors, made her wary of unearned wealth, especially that which appeared so mysteriously. David, however, saw something else. He saw Emika's face, pale and struggling for breath, the memories still fresh, still painful. He thought of the clinics that had turned them away, the pharmacists who had demanded payment up front. He thought of the endless struggle, the indignity of poverty that had claimed his son. "Grace," he said, his voice raw with suppressed emotion, "imagine what this could do. For us. For others like Emika." He picked up a stack of hundreds, felt its weight. "This could rewrite our story. This could build a clinic, help families who cannot afford medicine. Is that not a blessing from God, from our ancestors, to right a great wrong?" He remembered the proverb, "A broken pot can be mended, but a broken spirit is hard to heal." This money, he argued, could mend spirits. The debate between them raged silently, mirroring the moral storm within. Grace felt the weight of tradition, the fear of drawing powerful, unseen forces or dangerous human attention. "When you take what is not yours, even if found, the spirits of the rightful owner will follow you," she countered, her voice trembling. She envisioned the anger of an unknown, powerful individual, certain to be searching for such a fortune. She thought of the stories of people who came into sudden wealth, only for it to bring destruction and sorrow. Hadn't their own people always said, "The frog does not jump in the daytime for nothing"? This money had appeared for a reason, but was it a benevolent one? She feared the unseen hand of fate, that this windfall was merely a trap, a temporary illusion of prosperity before a devastating fall. The air seemed to crackle with their opposing convictions, each argument carrying the weight of their past and the uncertainty of their future. They were caught between the crushing memory of their son's death, the desperate hope for a better life, and the ingrained fear of retribution, both earthly and spiritual. They talked late into the night, the piles of money a silent, glittering testament to their dilemma. They knew nothing of Richard Okoro or Vanessa, but the money itself exuded an aura of illicit origin, a feeling that no honest sweat had gone into its making. This was not the reward for hard work, but a treasure dropped from the sky, heavy with implications. The ancestors, they felt, were watching. Their silence was not an absence, but a profound presence, judging their hearts. Richard's panic became a raging torrent, consuming his every waking moment. His pristine office, usually a sanctuary of controlled power, became a storm of frantic phone calls and desperate commands. He dispatched his most trusted, albeit unsavory, contacts, men with shadowy connections, to scour every donation center, every scrapyard, every informal market in Lagos. He pulled strings, made threats, his political facade cracking under the immense pressure. A lifetime of illicit dealings, of carefully cultivated secrets, rested entirely on the secure concealment of that mattress. Now it was gone. A silent accusation against his own meticulousness, a mocking symbol of his wife's unwitting revenge. He envisioned the money, his legacy, his ultimate shield, being squandered by some unknown pauper, or worse, discovered by his enemies. The thought was a vile poison, curdling his blood. Vanessa watched his descent with a mixture of horror and dawning realization. Her initial satisfaction had curdled into a bitter cocktail of guilt and fear. Seeing him like this, a desperate, cornered animal stripped of his usual arrogance, was terrifying. She had meant to wound him, to humble him, but never to destroy him. Not like this. Not with such an unimaginable sum of money at stake. "How much, Richard?" she finally dared to ask, her voice barely a whisper, as he paced their living room, like a caged beast tearing at his hair. How much was in that old mattress? He stopped, his eyes, wild and bloodshot, fixed on her. "Millions, Vanessa. Everything. Every naira, every dollar I've ever safeguarded. All gone. Because of your childish tantrum." His words were like a physical blow, stripping away any lingering sense of righteousness she clung to. The truth, when it finally hit her, was a crushing weight. She hadn't just thrown out a mattress. She had thrown out his entire empire, his darkest, most dangerous secret. The reality of his corruption, long suspected but never fully confronted, now lay bare before her. It wasn't just about his affair anymore. It was about the insidious rot beneath their lives, the foundation of ill-gotten gains that their opulent world was built upon. Her vengeance, driven by hurt and pride, had inadvertently uncovered a truth far more profound, far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. She saw herself, not as a righteous avenger, but as a naive fool, a pawn in a game far beyond her comprehension. A cold sweat broke out on her brow as she realized the potential consequences if this money fell into the wrong hands, or even if it merely disappeared. Richard, a man who built his life on control, was spiraling, and she, unknowingly, had pushed him over the edge. Her regret became a tangible thing, a heavy cloak she draped around her shoulders, cold and suffocating. The shame of his betrayal, now intertwined with the chilling fear of the storm she had unleashed. Richard's hunt for his missing fortune escalated from frantic desperation to ruthless efficiency. He deployed not just his political connections, but also his less reputable associates, men who operated in the shadows of Lagos, their methods brutal and unyielding. Posters, bearing a vague description of the mattress and an exorbitant reward, appeared in hidden corners of the city, not openly advertised, but whispered through networks of informants and scavengers. The search became a pervasive whisper in the underbelly of Lagos, a dangerous hum that promised immense wealth to the one who found it, and terrible consequences for those who stood in Richard's way. He leveraged old debts, called in favors, twisting arms and breaking spirits in his relentless pursuit. Sleep became a luxury he could no longer afford, his days a blur of threats and interrogations. He was a man possessed, his sanity slowly eroding with each passing hour. The mattress remained elusive. When a man loses his head, he uses his hands to find it, the griots would say, but Richard was using all his power to tear the city apart. Meanwhile, in their small room, David and Grace grappled with their impossible decision. The money, once a beacon of hope, now felt like a dangerous shadow. They had heard hushed rumors, vague warnings circulating in the market, about a powerful man searching desperately for a lost treasure. A treasure that sounded suspiciously like what lay hidden in their mattress. Fear, cold and insidious, began to replace their initial awe. They had seen what power could do in Lagos, how it could crush the small and the unassuming. "The bird that sings too loudly attracts the hunter," Grace murmured, her eyes wide with apprehension. They felt like mice caught in a trap, the cheese glittering, but the jaws of the trap slowly closing around them. The once comforting mattress now felt like a ticking bomb, each rustle of the fabric a reminder of the danger it concealed. Their simple lives had been irrevocably altered. They could no longer sleep soundly, haunted by the money's presence. Every knock on the door, every unfamiliar face in their compound sent a jolt of terror through them. They spoke in hushed tones, meticulously planning their next move. Should they keep it, flee the city, and start a new life? Could they truly enjoy wealth gained through such a mysterious, possibly illicit means? Or should they try to return it and risk facing the wrath of its powerful unknown owner? The memory of Emeka and the desire to use the money for good, to prevent similar tragedies, tugged at David's heart, a heavy counterpoint to Grace's overwhelming fear of the dangers it clearly represented. Their love, once a quiet solace, now became a desperate anchor in a sea of moral ambiguity, testing the very limits of their shared values and their understanding of right and wrong. The city, vibrant and alive, held its breath, unknowingly awaiting the collision course of their fates. Richard's net tightened. His informants, relentless and thorough, finally delivered a crucial lead. An old mattress, matching the description, had been seen being carted by a struggling couple into the Ajagunle district, a place synonymous with poverty and desperation. His blood ran cold, then hot. Ajagunle. The irony was almost unbearable. His blood money, hidden from the gaze of the powerful, lay exposed in the humble abode of the powerless. He mobilized his men, a convoy of dark SUVs descending upon the labyrinthine streets, their presence an alarming anomaly in the usually bustling but less affluent area. He was a force of nature, driven by greed and a primal need to reclaim what he believed was rightfully his. The hunt was nearing its end, and Richard, a predator sensing proximity to his prey, felt a thrill of anticipation, a chilling satisfaction. In their small room, David and Grace felt the city's pulse change. The air grew thick with an unspoken fear. News, like a swift bird, had reached them of heavily tinted vehicles and stern-faced men asking questions, searching for a lost item in their community. Their hearts hammered against their ribs like trapped birds. They knew. The hunter was at their door. They looked at each other, their eyes filled with a shared understanding, a silent agreement. The money, so enticing, so dangerous, could never bring them peace if it came at the cost of their freedom. Or worse, their lives. Their ancestors, they felt, warned against such a path. The yam that is sweet to the mouth can also bring worms to the stomach, Grace murmured, her voice resolute. David, recalling the searing pain of Emeka's death, knew that true wealth lay not in currency, but in integrity, and the ability to look at oneself in the mirror without shame. He clutched Grace's hand. We cannot live with this, Grace. Better to have peace in poverty than fear in riches. A plan, bold and dangerous, began to form in his mind. As Richard's men fanned out, closing in on their specific compound, David and Grace made a desperate final decision. They meticulously gathered the money, wrapping it tightly in a sack. Just as the heavy thud of boots sounded outside their door, accompanied by gruff voices demanding entry, David looked at Grace, his eyes filled with a quiet determination. There was no time for fear, only for action. The door crashed open, revealing Richard, flanked by his menacing guards, his eyes blazing with a furious triumph, already scanning the room for his precious mattress. But the mattress sat empty, devoid of its precious cargo. Richard's face, contorted with rage, turned ashen when he saw the empty mattress. His eyes, frantic and wild, darted around the room, searching, his voice a guttural roar. "Where is it? Where is my money?" David, though trembling, stood firm, Grace clinging to his arm. He met Richard's furious gaze not with fear, but with a quiet dignity that disarmed the politician momentarily. "The money you seek," David began, his voice surprisingly steady. "We believe it belongs to you. It was hidden inside this mattress, but we knew it was not ours to keep." Richard scoffed, taking a menacing step forward, but David held up a hand, a small yet powerful gesture of composure. "We have not spent a single naira. We have returned it to where it can truly serve, not for greed, but for healing. A few hours earlier, as Richard's men closed in, David and Grace had made a profound choice. Instead of fleeing or keeping the money, they had acted on the deepest conviction of their hearts. They had sought out a renowned community elder, Mama Nikichi, a woman known for her wisdom and integrity, and with her guidance, had anonymously donated the entire sum to the local community hospital, the very one that had turned Amika away years ago. A new wing, dedicated to indigent children, was to be built in Emeka's memory, a place where no child would ever be denied treatment due to lack of funds. They had done so with a signed anonymous letter, explaining only that the money was a gift from a grateful heart in memory of a lost son. This was the true harvest of their honesty, a redemption of their pain. Richard, upon learning this, was speechless. His empire built on corruption could not comprehend such an act of selflessness. The hospital board, overwhelmed by the anonymous donation, had already announced the project, celebrating the mysterious benefactor. To reclaim the money now would expose his illicit dealings, linking him directly to the funds. His rage turned into a cold, paralyzing fear of exposure, a fear far greater than the loss of the money itself. Vanessa, who had followed Richard, heard David's words, saw the simple truth in his eyes. Her guilt deepened, but a sliver of hope, a path to her own redemption, opened before her. Richard, defeated, could only retreat. His mask of power permanently shattered, his reputation irrevocably tainted by whispers of the sudden, unexplained wealth appearing at the hospital. His reign unraveled. Investigations into the sudden hospital endowment inadvertently led to the unraveling of his financial network. Richard eventually faced the consequences of his decades of corruption, his political career ending in disgrace. David and Grace, having chosen honesty over greed, found a peace money could not buy. Their story spread like wildfire through the Ai community, not of a couple who found a fortune, but of those who chose communal good over personal gain. They found subtle support, unexpected kindness, and renewed purpose. Grace, with newfound hope, found work in the very hospital clinic their son's money had helped build. David, now respected, became an informal community leader, his wisdom valued. Vanessa, stripped bare of her illusions, found strength in David and Grace's story. She divorced Richard, divesting herself of his tainted wealth, and sought out the hospital, becoming a quiet benefactor, dedicating her time to its charitable works. In the end, the mattress, full of illicit money, didn't just change the life of a homeless man. It purified a community, redeemed broken souls, and reaffirmed the timeless African values of communal harmony, honesty, wisdom, and the enduring power of forgiveness. If you enjoyed the story, then like, subscribe, and share this story with your loved ones. Also, tell us in the comments where you are watching from.